Welcome everybody here for this Sunday session. We are so excited to join you today at the virtual Beta NYC School of Data 2021. My name's Greta, and I am a co-director of Community Tech New York. We are an organization that works directly with communities to demystify the internet and build digital equity and digital rights. And this session is happening at this really interesting moment. So Noel, a couple of minutes ago, mentioned the Internet Master Plan for New York City, which emerged about a year ago, and right now is sort of in the throes of implementation. Lots to talk about there. But the other thing that has happened is that the federal stimulus has just come out, and it has in it, $7 billion for K through 12 broadband, another 10 billion. That's sort of a secret pot of money for broadband infrastructure and adoption. And then there's another $92 billion bill in Congress right now, sponsored by Senator Clyburn. And so we're going to see a lot happening soon. And basically what we need to do as a community is be ready with a plan, because pretty soon people are going to start writing checks, and we have to be pushing on the folks that are writing those checks and just making decisions about that money right now. And then we have to be ready when the checks are written to be able to put those right into projects. And that's going to take a lot of forward work on the community side. So this is a great moment to have this conversation. And I'm so excited to have CS here from Composites Collective, facilitating this deliberative conversation about our rights on the internet as New Yorkers. And I also am really grateful to Erica Kermani, who has pulled this event together and done a lot of the heavy lifting conceptually and logistically. Erica, do you have anything you want to say this morning?
Sure, thank you. And thanks for the background. It has been a great process to be able to bring you all here today for this session, and also via the Polis survey, so that we can really capture, like a collective and community-led kind of perspective and collection of values and principles that we can turn into demands. And of course, this is not the only space that it's being done, but it's an ongoing conversation, and we're glad that we can have them and hopefully push you all to have more of these conversations as well, if you're not already. And it's looking like a great group of different folks involved. So I'm excited for this. Thank you all. And of course, definitely uplifting CS's work in this kind of facilitation and this kind of conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. So hi, folks, I'm CS. I work in organizational transformation. I help organizations sort of shift power and bring more participatory practices. And I also facilitate. And so I'm really into sort of participation and making sure that voices have a say, especially in our cities and how our governance works. So I'm super excited to be here and to get to facilitate this session. It has a near and dear to me. So we were expecting a bunch more people, and what I'm hoping to do today, a little rundown, is we sent out a little Polis survey conversation to sort of get an idea of what ideas and sentiment was out there, what was floating around. And what we'll do today is take a look at those. And the plan is to pick some of those areas and break into little breakout groups and actually think about like what would be some concrete like solution implementation. Like how might we actually have a municipal option like a free broadband for everyone in New York City, right? For example. Like use it to continue the conversation or use it to push for specific policy or specific ideas. And so the skills that we'll be using today are a mixture from some work in Taiwan that they use for policy creation, also just sort of design thinking, ORID, facilitation frameworks, various things combined. And so without further ado, please do take a chance to participate. I will pull it up here. So the idea here is that we want to get an idea of what people think and feel about NYC's internet usage and access. And Polis is an open-ended survey where you, unlike other surveys, you can actually add your own perspective. So you agree, disagree, or you pass to the statements. And if you see something that's missing or something you want to expand upon, you can add it. And so it'd be really great if we can actually continue this conversation. And so send it out to your network groups, folks that you know, folks that might be interested in this. Please do send it out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've learned from this Polis conversation and how we can use this and how we're going to use it for our conversation. So the interesting thing about Polis is it shows you people's opinions over an issue. And right now, in terms of this topic of internet usage and access, we've got 3 opinion groups. And interestingly enough, they're kind of like, they're separate. They're not super close together. So opinion group A is a little bit different than C and B in the sense. So let's take a look at the report and see what we can learn. And I'm not going to dive into everything. I want to focus on what's the most important for our conversation. Okay. So this first part shows us how divisive the conversation was. And in general, there's a lot of consensus around certain statements, like I want transparency in how my internet operator provides. I want a municipal broadband option to all residents. NYC should provide it, like water or a utility. Every student in New York must get a free Wi-Fi ready programmable computer. There's a lot of consensus around that. Consensus around free public Wi-Fi, concerns around privacy, that digital access and communication is a right, not a privilege. We agree that broadband internet access should be provided for free. And we can start to see as we move where maybe there are areas that aren't consensus. So the most divisive statement was around options in choosing an internet provider. And in that case, what is this? This is just telling us that a lot of people felt like they had options and a lot of people didn't. And you could see here that everyone in group A says that they do have options, but people in group C say they don't. This was also divisive around needing to know how the internet works and just wanting access. And these are around speed. This is interesting. This one, whether or not the government should own and provide internet to all its residents. This is a little bit divisive. There's people in group C that are unsure and that do agree in comparison to the other groups. So this is what we are using to sort of harvest and seed our conversation. And I'd be happy to go. I think for now, I want to start there. Start with, this is actually what I used to do our harvesting. But as you go through it, you can see what the majority statements are, what most people agreed with. You can also start to see how the groups might break down in terms of like different metadata. So for example, groups B and C do not contain members that work in the NYC Public Library branch system, but group A does. I'm gonna see others that are different. There's right now, as of right now, there's no one that lives in public housing that's taken this survey. We've got some folks in telecommunications. So this is also important as we start to think about this. And I think this is something that we need to keep in mind throughout the session is the who's not in this room, right? And we'll be working through that with in our exercise as we identify stakeholders. But it is something that at least as we look at this survey, there is a bit of sort of maybe a homogenous group feel here. And then it breaks down by the groups and what made those groups unique and what makes them and how they compare against the other groups. So there might be some similarities, but they are different. So for example, everyone in group B pretty much agrees that they don't need to know how the internet works. They want access, but group A and C do want to know. So you can start to dive in and kind of get a nice range of information. But like I say, from today, we want to work a bit in this area, sort of the statements that have consensus that aren't too divisive, that we need to sort of start to tease apart, right? Because if we just say NYC government should support a decentralized municipal broadband option, but not administer or own the service, then what else, right? And I think when it comes to shaping policy, the more that we can go there with actual concrete ideas that are grounded in sort of facts with research and examples, the more that you can push that conversation forward. And also personally for myself, when I think about how we co-shape sort of direction and policy with our government, I think it's important to take them ideas because otherwise they might read that and decide to implement their own thing, right? So we want to try to get down to sort of like how might we actually do that, right? Like how might this actually work? How could this work down to more of a specific level? So let me run through what we'll be working on today. I sent everyone a link for this mural board, which is going to be our collaborative issue mapping and development. And so here's an example of basically what we'll do. I'm going to walk through an example and then we together are going to pick the statements, but then you'll get to self-select your breakout groups and what you want to tackle.
There was a question in the chat from Linda. What about people in supportive housing?
I was talking to somebody the other day who lives in supportive housing. I'm retired and I live in NYC. And a lot of seniors were given tablets. And a lot of people in supportive housing, they have limited income and they can't afford to have unlimited internet access. So, and I would, you know, and they don't get the resources that people in NYC get, but they are in supportive housing. That you live in New York, right? Well, so a lot of people live in supportive housing. So that's another program, and they don't get the resources that NYC people get, or they don't get certain resources that some of the seniors have been getting with. I think New York City gave away 10,000 tablets through the mayor's office, and a lot of people didn't know about it. And I just found out the other day that it was just for people 65 and up. And the person I was talking to was 50 years old in supportive housing, and they didn't get any resources. So I was saying to her that the social workers are not doing their job because they should be trying to bring resources to their facilities. So that's why I mentioned supportive housing, people who want broadband that might live in supportive housing that may not have any mental issues. They're just there because they came out of the shelters, but they need broadband and unlimited internet access. So that's what I was talking about.
Okay, so thank you so much, Linda. That potentially, I mean, this wasn't in, it's not one of the statements from Polis, but I'm happy to actually add it as we kind of break through what might be some group areas to focus on. It sounds like you're very interested in solutions for Wi-Fi to supportive housing. Okay, so the first plan is to decide what statements we want to tackle. And I'm gonna add supportive housing here, Linda's, unless there's any objections, because we didn't see it and I think it's an important area. So maybe it's like, it's actually easier for me to think about the how might we of this one. So I'm going to do it this way. So I pulled a few of these out to get us started, just to help us out. And I'm going to ask Erica if she can help with supportive housing providers, HPD, and other agents who assist people. Okay. And keeping an eye on chat or anything. But our plan right now is to rephrase. Okay. Thanks, Greta. I think we can disambiguate that when we get to the how might we portion of that. So our goal right now is to rephrase these statements into how might we, to sort of, the idea behind this is that this form of thinking actually expands our idea generation process instead of just stating something. So, and also we'll start to see that some of these have some interrelation and overlap. And so depending on how y'all want to break out and tackle these in groups, we might figure that out. But all right, so for the first one, I believe that broadband internet access should be provided for free to NYC residents. So what is a potential how might we statement for this? You can type in the chat or you can go ahead and grab the mic.
Yeah, this is Stuart Reed speaking from Digital Divide Partners. And one of the ways that we are currently providing free Wi-Fi in public housing is through community network partnerships with resident associations. And basically the network is co-owned and operated by residents themselves. We are their technical partner. And you know, it's been a challenge to get it up and running, but it works. And it's really empowering for the residents. And, you know, of course, the challenge is to find the funding to expand and sustain. But we've been doing this for about, about 5 years now, and getting very good feedback from residents.
I'm just going to put a pin there. I think that's what you're sharing is fantastic. This to me is a fantastic sort of idea or solution that we're going to be adding in that next phase. But do you have a way that you might rephrase this statement into a how might we question? Do you have a thought?
Yeah, you know, my whole sense is how might we partner with residents to meet their broadband needs?
How might we partner
with residents?
Okay, how might we partner with residents to meet their broadband needs?
You know, that's a way to approach the situation in a non-paternalistic way. So often we so-called experts think that we know and have the answers, and we don't.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Does anyone have another how might we for this? Or are we good to move on to the next one?
Hi, everybody. If I'm understanding this right, I mean, I think how might we would be, how might we ensure sustainable funding for such a thing?
Okay.
There's also another one in the chat from Loretta.
How might we provide products for free to perfect. I will add that. And I think those are good 3. How might we for that one? Fantastic. All right, these are great. Now we've got our how might we brains running. Let's try this one. I want NYC to provide a municipal broadband option to all residents, like water or utility. So this one is focusing on the idea that municipal broadband would be considered a utility, like how we receive water or electricity. Any thoughts from folks? Jolie.
Not exactly, but I just have a comment before we go too far. Is how do we define broadband? Is broadband just high-speed internet, or is it like triple play, or what?
That's a great question. So here it was defined as minimum bandwidth speeds of 25 megabits per second download and 3 upload, and target download speeds of 100 download and 10 upload. So
my suggestion would be, the question is, might we define that as high-speed internet rather than broadband to avoid confusion?
Okay, are you saying that there's a disambiguation between broadband and versus high-speed?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so I am going to note this mostly as a potential area of. So Erica's saying broadband is currently defined by the FCC as 20. Okay. It sounds like there are some additional nuances in there. Is it okay that for our purposes, if we use this definition and also tie it to high-speed internet for now?
Sure. I just want to get that in there just so that before we get going, so we know what we're talking about. So we're talking about we're saying broadband, but we mean high-speed internet. That's what I see.
Okay. Greta, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, going back to the question of a municipal broadband option, like water or utility, I'm gonna put in here how might we anticipate and strategize around pushback from the telecom industry.
I see in chat from Julie, how might we ensure accountability and community control in a municipal option? Julie, is that for this municipal broadband?
Yes, it is.
And from Rob. Okay, this is a great note, Rob. They need to define what acceptable internet would actually be.
Hey, what'd you have?
Does anyone else have a how might we for the broadband? And I see a raised hand.
Julie.
I was just going to point out there was one in chat from Lorita. Who would it operate under?
Who would it operate?
It's an interesting question.
Is that for the
municipal option?
Okay. How might we frame this? And how can we reframe this into a how might we question? Or does it tie to this other one that was consensus on, which is the next one? NYC government should support a decentralized municipal broadband option, but NYC government should not administer or own the service. Melissa, all right, I like this rephrase. How might we ensure fair administration and regulation of broadband? I think that is a fantastic rephrase of Lorita. Is that? Yes, Lorita.
Okay, all right. It's just about accountability, because even if the government isn't going to run it, they would have to regulate it. So like, even if you had a government component of it, we don't want another agency, I'm hoping. That sort of will, that much we don't. And we have to realize the government doesn't necessarily have the expertise in itself. So there's going to have to be a lot of partnerships.
Right. So does this work for the how might we ensure fair administration regulation? I think that's getting away.
Yes, I miss that one, and I guess the accountability piece above. How might we ensure accountability and community? Well, not necessarily community control, but that could be a component as well. I just think this one way of looking at it, since this is supposed to be, I guess, a design lab or throwing out ideas, not looking at one way to solve every problem in every neighborhood or every community.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. are great. There's lots of how might we's for groups to tackle. All right, so this one is similar. It says it should support a decentralized option, but it should not administer or own the service. Does anyone have any thoughts for this one? Or do you feel that some of the how might we's on the next one and the municipal broadband option to all residents kind of capture this? This kind of feels like, how might we ensure fair administration or regulation of municipal broadband if they're not going to administer or run the service? Julie, how might we identify partnerships across sectors to support a municipal option?
I'll just say that there's a model, which is the MNN, the way that the public access cable is administered, where, and, even for funding that, the franchisees pay an amount of money which funds the service, and it's independent of the city for the exact reason of the city doesn't want to be responsible for any content.
That's fantastic, Jolie. I hope that we can capture that in one of the ideas for the breakout sessions. Just here, Ankit, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Please correct me if I haven't. Has contributed. How might we ensure small and large ISPs have a fair shot at funding under a decentralized system? Okay. Those are good. So there are a couple more that I had pulled out that we can generate some how might we's over if folks are interested, or if we feel, I think we've got enough questions here for that we could tackle in breakout groups. But these were some other things that came up. These are from Polis, and this was part of what was raised here, so I do want to address it. If there's this, how might we provide internet access to people in supportive housing?
I don't think I added, I was just saying in the chat, supportive housing can kind of be a lot of different things, I think, in the way that the city looks at service delivery or like other private providers. So supportive housing could mean a lot of things, and I think it is really important to talk about supportive housing beyond NYCHA for sure, but that'll mean like a lot of different things, I think, unless I'm missing something specific.
Okay. Do we want to go ahead and break these down into how might we questions? Are there folks that are interested in delving into these two areas, or do we feel like we have enough how might we's that are piquing people's interest to like dive in to solve? Let's just vote with reactions, because that'll help me see who feels that there are enough how might we statements that feel interesting and that you're excited to sit and generate ideas around.
One thing that isn't mentioned there is computer literacy, which perhaps is another topic altogether. People, it's all very well giving people internet, but they need to know how to use.
Okay, do you have a how might we for that one, Jolie?
How might we ensure computer literacy?
So it was about like half and half, and I don't know if that's just like folks are away from their computers or if that's actual gauge of interest.
The we part?
Yes. So let's vote on which how might we's, which are the yellow cards, are most interesting. Okay. So thanks folks for participating. Now what we're going to do is break into breakout groups. And each breakout group will get to tackle one of these questions. So what we'd like to do now is one person, pick a person in the group as your spokesperson to walk us through your conversation. And I think it would be good to hear from all the groups first, and then wherever we are with time or interest, we can start to capture questions or uncertainty. But also, if you're following along on your mural board and you have a question or you identify something, you can add a Post-it into that little breakout area to capture your own thoughts if you're not able to share them to the group. Does anyone want to volunteer to go first? And Erica, do other folks have the ability to share their screen?
I can add that.
Or I can.
I think people have access now.
Okay. So would anyone like to go first and share out your creative thinking around this? All quiet. No one wants to volunteer.
I'll volunteer.
There we go.
Hi, my name is Ankit. I was in the group, how might we be able to design and provide free Wi-Fi to NYCHA and other supportive housing? And we had a discussion about like what is NYCHA and supportive housing? And really the conversation, we had folks that have a lot of experience working with these, with NYCHA, not only just in New York City, but working with public housing or around the world. And so we had a really rich conversation about what public-private partnerships would look like, how might they be structured, who would manage a partnership like that, where a telecom provider, let's say, is partnering with a local NGO, and kind of building the NGO representing the community to have a service that's provided free of charge. There were questions around like, well, okay, there's bureaucracy to installing hardware in buildings, and then potentially questions around surveillance that we grappled with. We talked about like, what does this look like for it to be sustainably funded? How, like, what is it subsidized? Is it, are the telecoms asked to completely pay for it? Will they push back on that? And throughout this, we were talking about the different stakeholders because it was decentralized. We started with residents, but then brought in the bandwidth providers and the NGOs, all the agencies, city agencies that need to be involved in order to deal with this. How does philanthropy get involved? Do they do so and for a certain amount of time, and then what happens? Who picks up the slack after that? And yeah, I think that's kind of where we ended. I think it was a really interesting conversation, and would love to see, I think, some documentation around it.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. And let's dive to, does one of the other groups want to?
Yes, I can go next on the bottom part of the board. Our group, which included Loretta, Rob, and Noel, and Sam, and Pavel, and myself, we tackled the question, how might we ensure accountability and community control? So we kind of tried to organize ideas roughly into 3 themes. The first one was about like what sort of governance structure would that include? And we also talked about the importance of maybe making this, considering like if it could be a regional program to account for like regional risks, like for example, like how Hurricane Sandy impacted the entire region and not just New York City. We also talked about how New York watersheds like expand beyond New York City, and so that could be a source of like inspiration for that. Then we also talked about like the pros and cons of having multiple broadband options, and like there are kind of implications there for accountability in terms of like the economics, like the pricing, and also I think that ties back into some of the risks about mismanagement. And then our third kind of theme was around education and ensuring that people who are implementing these solutions, who are in these agencies, have the right expertise, and I think that also ties back into like general education and like public awareness too. And then we identified a lot of stakeholders that might be involved with some of these different ideas. Yeah.
These are great. These are great. I'll hold my further comment for the next group, the last group to go. Thank you so much for sharing. I think our last group is all the way at the top, and this is, oop, not too far, in mural space. All right. How might we anticipate and strategize pushback from telecoms? Have someone from this group share?
I can jump in. So for ideas, we talked about doing research on telecom industry practices and kind of calling out any examples of kind of discriminatory practices to create a set of kind of talking points to raise awareness about this. Also the idea of tracking those companies' profit margins and actually connecting to, you know, the owners of those companies to kind of personalize the issue and make people familiar with who they are. We also talked about community advisory councils as a way to kind of give input on the municipal option. Yeah, helping people understand kind of the status quo and the current offerings. There was an idea around outlining areas where telecom industry perhaps could still provide coverage, focused on more like high-income neighborhoods. Yeah, and then we talked about organizing and advocacy, potentially including protests, national organizing and coalition. And then we had some examples of partnerships here in New York. And that overlaps with some of the resources that we included, including NYC DSA Tech Action Group. And there are a couple other links and examples of municipal internet options. And yeah, some of the risks, just thinking about lawsuits from the telecom industry. There was a comment about like the FBI and NSA, you know, controlling social activity. Lots of thoughts around like, how are we thinking about usage guidelines and making sure that issues around privacy and free speech are kind of built in as values in the municipal option. We didn't really get to stakeholders, but Monique joined us from Detroit, and she was saying how there are really only 2 providers there, so it's a very, you know, not many options. And the fiber providers aren't set up to do residential. I think that's it from our group.
Okay, these are really fantastic. And so I was jumping into various groups, and in one of the groups, they're like, well, we don't have this municipal option yet, right? We don't. So a lot of this is in a space of sort of desire and where we hope to go. And this exercise is really the tip of the iceberg, right? To continue these conversations in any one of these sections and really expand upon these ideas, what we actually would need to do is to start to bring in those stakeholders and engage them in the conversations. And that's sort of the importance of identifying these stakeholders, because to me, these are the beginnings of conversations. And they also start to point to sort of areas where we might need more information, or where we might need to disambiguate and elevate some more facts or define things more clearly. But what I hope is that these conversations continue, right? And that you start to say, okay, so let's bring in someone, or how do we get the closest representative from a telecom industry into our conversation? It might be difficult, but how do they get there? So I just wanted to say that, but I want to open the floor for any reactions, questions, thoughts from folks.
Hey, it's Greta. I'm jumping in to say that we, I think this, and I'm curious, CS, if you find this because you do a lot of this deliberative work, and it works at its own pace. Like, as you're saying, these are conversations, right? And it takes time. However, I think this month and next month, I'm thinking back to the session that CTNY had on Thursday that was led by Sam Grassley and Hannah Sun, which was about the mayoral race, which is heating up right now. So I think we're going to see this month and next month are going to be really important in the mayoral race. And then the other thing that I mentioned at the beginning is there's all this money heading our way from the federal government, and we need to collectively like be able to funnel that money into stuff. And so how do you kind of work at a deliberative pace when there's these very pressing kind of action steps that need to happen? Like, is there a way, for example, to say like, okay, what we found on Thursday, the mayoral candidates, their positions on this stuff are not very well formed yet. So is there an opening there that we could funnel the deliberative conversations into that, like pushing them towards like better, filling in their plans, for example?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. Do you have like access to these candidates? Like, can you convene these candidates together, or is that harder to do?
That's probably harder. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think that I don't know. I think it's harder because there's 40 of them. So we were thinking, maybe it's like an invitation to, like, if you send us something, we'll post it somewhere, like, or we'll do a rundown of, I don't know, a summary of everybody's position or something. I don't know though what a more deliberative step would be.
Yeah, so it kind of it depends, right? Because you could so let me ask one more question here. Is there a place online that's just like facts and information about like broadband internet access, a lot of these like places where they can go find some of the resources that are even named here or just like kind of distilled out? Does that exist?
I don't think so. Sam, are you on? What did you find when you were researching?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think in terms of what's out there, in terms of information about New York City, it's really been mostly oriented around the Internet Master Plan and the work that's been going on there. And then when I was researching the candidates and their positions, it was either, something mentioned on their website, or if they've had public office before, the comptroller actually does a lot of like that fact-based like reporting work. And so they have the benefit of having more analysis around it. But yeah, I mean, to the point, there is no centralized location for all of this. There hasn't been a mayoral forum specifically around technology and broadband. So I think that our hope is to sort of bubble up these ideas to make sure, even though there's so much going on, that they're covered as